In the history of exploration, there are men who return with trophies and men who return with scars. Buzz Aldrin was supposed to be the ultimate symbol of American victory, the second human being to walk on the face of another world, a mechanical genius, an unshakable pilot. But decades after the mission, during a routine interview marking the anniversary of Apollo 11, the script fell apart. The lights were bright. The questions were standard, but when asked to describe the moon, the hero didn't smile. He froze. His voice cracked. Tears filled his eyes, not of joy, but of a haunting, heavy weight. He whispered 6 words that stopped the control room cold. "The moon is not what you think." Was this the reaction of an aging man, or a warning from someone who had seen behind the curtain of reality? To understand his tears, we have to go back to the silence. July 1969, Kennedy Space Center. The Saturn V rocket stands 363 feet tall, a skyscraper filled with explosive fuel. It was a machine built by 400,000 engineers with one purpose: to break the chains of gravity. Inside the command module, Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin were strapped onto a bomb. They knew the math. Success and total incineration were separated by fractions of a second. When the engines lit, the sound was so violent it shook buildings miles away. But as they climbed, the violence gave way to a terrifying smoothness. At 24,000 miles per hour, they slipped the bonds of Earth. For 3 days, they floated through the void. Mission reports confirm that Aldrin's heart rate remained freakishly calm. He was a scientist, focused on the data, but as the Earth shrank to the size of a marble, the crew crossed an invisible line. They were entering a place where life was never meant to exist. The defining moment of fear wasn't the landing, it was the orbit. When Apollo 11 slipped behind the dark side of the moon, radio contact with Houston was severed. For 48 minutes, the 3 men were the most isolated human beings in history. No telemetry, no voices, just the dead static of the universe. As Armstrong and Aldrin began their descent in the Eagle, the computer began to scream. Program alarms 1202. The system was overloading. They were miles above the surface, falling fast, blind to the terrain, with a computer that was effectively quitting. Aldrin read out the data with robotic precision. Armstrong took manual control. They had 30 seconds of fuel remaining. If the engine cut, they would be entombed there forever. When they touched down, the world cheered. But inside the lander, the cheering was millions of miles away. Armstrong and Aldrin looked out the small triangular window. There was no wind, no movement, just a stillness that had lasted for billions of years. Aldrin stepped off the ladder and looked up. This is where the story shifts. He didn't describe the view as beautiful. He called it magnificent desolation. The sky was a bottomless black abyss. Even though the sun was shining, the horizon felt unnaturally close, curving away too sharply. It felt less like a planet and more like a stage set in the middle of nowhere. Aldrin later stated that the silence wasn't just quiet, it was heavy. It felt hostile. Before stepping out, Aldrin did something few knew about. He took out a small communion kit, poured wine, and prayed. It was a desperate grasp for something human, something spiritual, in a place that felt utterly godless. He was trying to impose meaning on a world that rejected it. Standing there, Aldrin realized the terrifying truth. Everything he had ever loved, every war ever fought, every human who had ever lived was on that tiny blue dot floating in the dark. He wasn't just looking at the moon, he was looking at the insignificance of humanity. And when he came back, he couldn't unsee it. For years, people dismissed Aldrin's trembling voice as simple exhaustion or PTSD, but modern science has begun to suggest that Aldrin's intuition was right. The moon is strange. During the Apollo missions, astronauts left seismometers on the surface. When they jettisoned their lunar modules, crashing them back into the moon, the sensors picked up something impossible. On Earth, a quake dies out in minutes. On the moon, the impact caused the planet to ring like a bell for nearly an hour. This suggests the moon is not a solid, dense rock like Earth. It is internally fractured, perhaps even partially hollow in its acoustic structure. Even more haunting is the origin story. Isotope analysis proves that the moon is made of the exact same material as Earth. It isn't a stranger, it is a piece of us. Billions of years ago, a collision tore a chunk of our planet off and flung it into the cold. When Aldrin stood there, he wasn't standing on an alien world. He was standing on a corpse, a dead, silent piece of our own home, frozen in time. Aldrin returned a hero, but the magnificent desolation followed him. He couldn't relate to normal life. How do you go to the grocery store after you've stared into the infinite void? It's hard to handle traffic lights, he once said, after you've been to the edge of the universe. He spiraled into depression. He drank. He searched for a way to quiet the silence in his head. The confident pilot was gone, replaced by a philosopher who knew too much. When he said, "The moon is not what you think," he wasn't talking about aliens or conspiracies. He was talking about a mirror. The moon showed him that we are fragile, temporary, and incredibly small. Buzz Aldrin's tears were not a sign of weakness. They were the only rational response to the absolute reality of space. He saw the universe without a filter. Science is now catching up to what Aldrin felt. The moon is a dynamic, mysterious, ringing remnant of our own creation. It is a graveyard in a garden waiting to be born. And perhaps the haunting feeling Aldrin brought back was simply the realization that Earth is the anomaly, the silence is the rule, life is the exception. What do you think Buzz Aldrin saw in that darkness? Does the silence of the moon frighten you or call to you? Let us know in the comments below.